All right, well, welcome Port Alberni and Aerosmith and friends of Aerosmith. We're getting a lot of people watching these, over 200 in some cases, so I think it's more than just our church that's watching it, so it's kind of fun. And I'm here at the Coombs Country Candy, and it's actually my first time to actually stop here. I've driven by it, of course, every time I come into town, but this is my first time to stop here. And I'm here with Marian Pickton, and she's going to share with us her 4 H's today. So Marian, thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
And our first H, of course, is history. How did you get here?
Well, I got here 52 years ago.
Wow.
I finished my training in England.
Training for what?
I was a nursery nurse. In other words, I could look after children in private homes.
Yes.
And then I had a friend I trained with, and she wanted to come to Canada, so we were coming to Canada together. Well, she found a boyfriend.
Of course.
And I had already gone through all the paperwork and decided I was going to come anyway.
Good for you.
So my parents were a little upset, I think, and I was going anyway. I had that stubborn streak in me. So I came out in 68, and my parents were quite concerned that I had somewhere to go. And because my mother's cousin was on the island, that's why I came to the island. I came to Comox when it was very small.
Yes.
Then I got a job in Vancouver working for a family. And I got involved with the United Church there. That was the closest thing I could find to a Methodist church.
Right.
Because it's not what you would call it's not that common in Canada to find Methodist churches. So I used to teach Sunday school, and I got to know some people. And eventually, I was at a Sunday school meeting, and there was a fellow from the Ministry of Social Services, or the equivalent of, and he said, "Oh, you're one of Goldie's angels." And I thought, who's Goldie? And he told me to get in touch with her, because that meant I could then work in daycares.
Okay, right.
And they were very new at that point in British Columbia. So I got a job almost immediately after that, and I worked in childcare in various forms for a very long time, until I retired from teaching the courses here in Port Alberni at North Island College.
Okay.
In the meantime, I met my husband, Cliff, and because he was an engineer and he got projects all over BC, and basically, after we'd got married in 74, we went up to Hudson Hope, and he built the Peace Canyon Dam, or we was part of the Peace Canyon Dam project.
Yeah.
So we lived there for 4 years, and then we moved into Fort St. John, where he worked for Petrocan, and we had a bookstore. And then my diabetes was getting out of control, so he felt that it was better if we moved back to Vancouver.
Right.
So we did that. I was working at that point, and he was working as well. And then he got a job at what was over here in Port Alberni. I came over to Port Alberni for a conference, and I said, "Oh, I think you'd died and gone to heaven if you moved to Port Alberni." And he said, "Pardon?" I said, "Oh, there's water, there's walking, there's
mountains,
the outdoors and everything." So anyway, he managed to get onto a job at Alberni Engineering at that point. And we've been in Port Alberni. I've been in Port Alberni ever since.
Right.
It changed hands, and then Alberni Engineering did. I stayed teaching, and he did contracting work at various places. And then in 2003, he was diagnosed with cancer. So He lived for about five months, and then so I've been on my own for a very long time.
Yeah.
Now then, I had been brought up in a Christian family. In fact, the other day when I was going through some family history, I found my christening records. So,
wow.
Obviously somebody had given them to me, thought I was important. Anyway, I'd known Pam Mann for many years at the college, and she was always supportive and said, "Oh, do you want to come to church?" And I said no. And so after Cliff died, she invited me to the Christmas service.
Christmas. Yep.
Yes. Well,
what year was that?
2004.
Okay.
So I went to the service, and you know, people often come back to the house for tea, and I didn't know anybody. So anyway, I went to the service. It's pitch black. All you've got is candlelight. But I cried the whole way through.
Wow.
And so I thought, I've made a fool of myself. Everybody's seen me cry. I didn't have any logic. So I said I wouldn't go back to the house, and I went home. And I was walking the dog. I went home and I walked the dog. And it was very interesting because as I was walking in the neighborhood, a voice said to me, "I'll always be with you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you." I thought, right, yes. So it was, I didn't go back to church. It did invite me on the Sunday. No, I'd made a fool of myself. Well, at the end of April, they had a ladies' retreat.
Yep.
And at that point, Pam's daughter Sharon was in my class. She bounded into my office on the Monday morning, and she said, "Marian, you've got to come next year. It's so much fun." And she was just lit up.
Wow.
I thought, right, I'm going back to church. And I went straight down to Pam's office and said, "I'll come to church with you on Sunday." And ever since, I've been at Arrowsmith.
Okay, so that's how you got here.
That's how I got here.
That's fantastic. You know, I got to tell you, so being a pastor at the front of the church, it is amazing how often people cry at church.
Oh, I know.
It happens almost every Sunday. Something touches them in a significant way. God touches them, and they shed tears. So it's not that uncommon.
Oh, I understand that, but it wasn't just a few tears. It was
sobbing.
It was sobbing. I mean, Clifford only died 5 weeks beforehand.
Yeah,
so
good. Understand. Good. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's
You're
good.
more than welcome.
All right. So our next H, Marian, is heroes or hero.
I took some time to think about my heroes, and I think the heroes that I've got are the Weed family from Chilliwack. The reason being that, going back to my history, Cliff was good friends with Walter and Lenora when he was in some difficulties, and they helped him a lot. So we would go out to Chilliwack to go to the Mennonite church in Chilliwack on Sundays. And we said, well, this is an awful long drive on a Sunday morning. So they then introduced us to the church in Willingdon, in Burnaby.
Big church.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't as that big when we were going. But the family in Chilliwack was really great. They had 6 children, and for Cliff, it was seeing what a family could be like. And Walter and Lenora always kept in touch with us. In fact, I had a call probably 6 weeks ago from Lenora. Her husband died soon after Cliff, believe it or not.
Really?
But they came out over here just before he died, and we had a great day together. And Walter was he was a man of the Bible, and he certainly helped in many ways us, and he basically led Cliff to Christ. And so he's been they've been my hero, and they're still,
Yeah.
the family's still part of
Your life.
our life.
Yeah.
We'd have their girls in just before Christmas and show them more of a different type of Christmas.
Yeah.
But
Good.
it was good, and we went to all the kids' wedding except for one. So
Wow. So
yeah.
real family friends.
real family friends.
Well,
yes.
that's a great hero. I mean, it's what we usually look for in heroes, right? Is someone who can point us in the right direction and be an example to us.
Yes.
It sounds like that's what they were.
They were a great example, and they
Yeah.
had other friends. And in fact, the minister's wife, what's his second wife, as it turns out now, she still contacts with me too, Nettie Walkentine. But yes,
Good.
they were great.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we'll go on to the next H in a slightly different location.
Okay.
All right. And now we come to the intimate part of the interview. It's the hurts in life, some of the challenges and difficulties throughout the course of life. And I'm actually hearing from Marian so many people that this is the part that they are actually very attracted to, because it's so real, it's vulnerable, it's sharing a bit of our lives with the family that we're a part of, the
Yeah.
greater family. So whatever you're comfortable sharing, Marian, from the category of hurts.
I think I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, I've had a lot of small hurts, I would say. They've been, I mean, we lost 3 businesses and all the rest of it through life, but that to me was life. But I think the biggest personal hurt was with my youngest brother. He's 16 years younger than I am, and he and his wife, who they were both very young, they came out to Port Alberni soon after we moved here.
Yeah.
And she was very giddy, you know. They hadn't been married very long, and this was the first time on a plane and all the rest of it. So, but she and Cliff didn't hit it off very well. So whenever we did things, I guess Cliff didn't tolerate her youngness. I don't know whether that's quite the right word, but so Cliff and I had arranged for us to go into the Salmon Derby. We had rented a boat for the weekend, and they were coming with us, and oh yes, it was going to be great. So Cliff and I were out doing something, and when we came back, they had borrowed my car, which was fine. They were allowed to do that, and they had gone up to see the cousins in Comox. And they'd left a note to say they wouldn't be back. And it was devastating, because this was the baby brother that I had spent quite a lot of time bringing up when my mum had been sick. And he wouldn't talk to me, and they just said, "Sorry, Marian, he's not coming back." We said, well, we'll go fishing anyway. We've chartered the boat, and that's the way it's going to have to be. Well, they did come back. They returned the car, and that was it. He wouldn't talk to me for a very long time. And my parents, I tried to get my parents involved, which was not the right thing to do, and prayed about it. And I would go over to England to visit, but it never felt like a good visit with her. I had to go and see him, but it wasn't going to. We couldn't fix it.
Yeah.
Well, he then got into some financial troubles, and I met up with his wife, and she had grown a lot. And at that point, she made the decision that she wasn't going to have him back in the house. He happened to be in jail at that point.
Oh.
And so things sort of began to start healing after that. I did go and see him in jail, but he didn't have much to say. Life was very surface. So I guess there was a lot of heartache until probably about the year 2000. He remarried at this point, and we thought he had got rid of his old habits, but unfortunately he hadn't. He got into some more trouble. But by this time he had a child, and or might even have been two. But his diabetes also got out of control, and he ended up by having his leg amputated.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was really
Sobering.
the part that thought, this can't go on for any longer.
Yeah.
And I was at the edge of the phone thinking I might have to go back, because he happened to have two mini strokes while he was in the hospital. And, it was just a question of, will I go or won't I go? And I'd only been back about 10 days. So I then went over after that. I went back after he'd had his leg amputated. I went back for Christmas. And we had him home for, my mum had him home at that point, and we just, I was upset at him, but he wasn't making much of an effort, because the doctors had told him that he'd be lucky to live 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about 15 years now, so it's been really great, and we have good conversations.
Good.
So
there's been some level of restoration.
Oh,
and
we've
reconciliation.
restoration, yes.
Good.
So
Yeah.
but it
Wow.
was very hurtful.
Sure.
But God had His hand in it, and it was good for us.
Yeah. Well, we don't always choose the easy path to travel or to grow through. And
No.
sometimes it gets hard, but
Yeah.
God's faithful in it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it was sort of.
Good.
And at this point, Cliff had died by this time, so it was kind of.
Yeah.
I was dealing with it on my own.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that ended in reconciliation.
Yes.
That's good. Good end to that story.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. So from heartaches, we go to hopes. It's. I think it's the natural direction to go into. So, tell us about some of your hopes these days.
Well, I guess number one is probably everybody else's for COVID to disappear,
Yeah.
but I think that'll be with us for a long time. My hope is, one of the big ones that I've got is that I would love to see a resurgence in the church, not just Arrowsmith, but churches in general. I feel that COVID, although we may have lost some people because of COVID, in general, I think people are also searching for other things, and they're beginning to realize that God is the way, and that Jesus did die for us.
Yeah.
So that's obviously my biggest hope. Another hope is that perhaps next year I can get back to see my mother, who's 98. No, she's going to be 97.
Wow.
So she keeps on saying, I guess it's a good job you don't have a ticket to come out in the spring. Well, she's been saying that for 12 months. Her dementia's getting a lot worse.
Oh, okay.
And so I just think it would be good if I could get back to see her and the rest of my family, but because I've got nobody out here.
Yeah.
Just myself.
So those are some good hopes. I mean, within the next 12 months, I think there's some reasonable hope for that. So
yes, I was talking to my brother today, and I said, oh, well, I hope to be back for her 98th birthday, so which is next May.
That'd be awesome.
So, I think you've got to look forward, but I think that some good will come out of this. And well, of course, the other thing is that I am hoping to move at some point, but I'm hoping for the right house to appear.
Okay, so that's another hope.
Another hope. Oh, yes.
Good. Well, and in regards to your first hope, I think COVID has actually caused a lot of searching in people's hearts and minds, and I think they're beginning to recognize that maybe there is some hope and faith in God through stuff like this. So it is, I think, spurring that. We're not quite as sure of ourselves as a society as we once were.
No.
And that's what often turns us towards helping God.
Yes.
So I think you got some reasonable hope there too.
Right.
I think that's what God's been up to. Good. All right.
All
Well,
right,
thanks
thank
for
you.
sharing those things with us. It was
thank
great.
you.
I have met you a few times, of course, before.
Yes,
But it was really nice to hear more of your story. So thanks for sharing, Marian.
you're more than welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.